The Signs of Spiritual Practice by Noshul Kempo. Homage to the King of Self-Originating Wisdom. This natural state of mind is the primordially unborn nature. When realized from the depth of your heart, compassion spontaneously wells forth for all unprotected beings who have not recognized the essence of their mind. And uncontrived supreme bodhicitta arises. Boundless faith and devotion are born toward the incomparable, glorious protector gurus, who are the supreme oceanic fields of refuge. And impartial, pure perception will surely arise. All you who seek the natural state of mind, know these as the true signs of spiritual practice. This is a message from the Tibetan stray dog, Jamyang Dorje.
Welcome to our winter retreat. It's so wonderful to see so many beautiful faces. I want to just open this retreat with a very short prayer and dedicate this retreat to everyone here on the journey, all our teachers that are here, and all teachers all over the world, and also to Changu Rinpoche. Dearest Rinpoche, I offer this retreat in love and devotion to you, my beloved Root Guru, Kenshin Changu Rinpoche. Vajra, you are the Lord of all existence and peace. Incomparable Guru, I prostrate at your feet. Soul Father, Venerable Guru, I miss you now. In all my future lifetimes, may we never again be apart. We dedicate any and all merit from this retreat to the liberation of all sentient beings. May all beings be freed from the ocean of samsara and its ceaseless waves of suffering. Emaho. Changu Rinpoche's main practice in his lifetime was Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava. And this retreat is within the theme of Padmasambhava's teachings. It's a 5-day retreat. It's rather short, so we want to really dive right in and speak about tonight at first just the theme of this retreat, what this is really about. What are we all doing here? Why did we all come here? What are we seeking? What are we arriving at? What are we realizing? And Padmasambhava's, one of his main teachings was to cut through samsara, was to cut through the mind and its endless narrative of the world and its endless arising of thoughts, which are personality selves and conditioned selves, naturally put our attention on, and then through craving and aversion and actually thinking, we end up in the midst of samsara, caught in the web of thoughts, of the mind, of the personal mind. And so a lot of what he did when he came to Tibet was give a series of teachings that just went right to the heart of what was happening in each of our own minds. And it was so profound and powerful that as he would meet with people, he would point his finger at their heart and give this oral instruction, and they would be liberated. And there's still stories today of when his oral instructions are spoken, people are able to have the obscurations of the personal mind cleared away, cut through thoughts, and experience, sometimes for the first time, what's called Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is the realization of Buddhahood, essentially. It's self-realization. And what Padmasambhava was saying in his teachings was it's not something to attain, it's not something to pursue, it's not even something we need to put effort into. In fact, we need to do just the opposite. We need to just stop. Stop thinking, stop narrating, stop liking, disliking. Almost every single thing the personal mind does, he just said, stop it all. And if you stop it, if you stop thinking, and he wasn't talking about the arising of thoughts. He was saying, let thoughts arise, but don't touch them. Don't be attached to them. And they'll just fall away, and eventually you won't even notice they're there. And what you'll find is this, once the attention is no longer going to the samsaric existence, the clearing away is actually the natural state. It's not something that's happening somewhere else. It's always right here. We're just not experiencing it because our attention is on worldly concerns or samsara or whatever. So his oral instructions give step-by-step instructions. And as we follow them, there's a transmission in them. So even if some of the terminology we may not be familiar with, we receive the transmission, seeds are planted, and he actually carries us into that state of realization, the natural state. And in the passages we're going to do this weekend, we're going to get more into those step-by-step instructions exactly, because we're going to read his exact words, what he's saying to do. And we do it right in the oral instructions as we're listening in the guided meditation. As I was kind of going through the announcement that we sent out and going through Jennifer's, we had a part called Reflections from Jennifer on the upcoming retreat. It occurred to me that Jennifer was saying the exact same thing, maybe a little bit different terminology. And there was one part of the announcement. Can I read that? Yeah, sure. Someone vacuuming? So in Jennifer's reflections, she talks about becoming quiet, becoming still, and resting the attention on what she's terming listening itself. And the Tibetan instructions and oral instructions and transmissions are saying the same thing. So we can use any terminology that we feel comfortable with. And almost all traditions are saying the exact same thing. Jennifer's also said the life and meditation is the living of moment to moment, with immediacy of being with and as, the rising, abiding, and falling away. What she's talking about is the rising and falling away of thoughts. Once we put our attention on them and we start spinning and start creating something with them, we're in samsara. And part of the teachings that I've been practicing and we're going to be exploring together and sharing this weekend is about just that. What happens when we don't continue the story anymore? When we exit samsara? What happens then? The last part I want to read from Jennifer's announcement, which I really loved, is the relative world is continuously being born in an apparent sort of way, and the judging aspect of the mind is continuously assigning beliefs: good, bad, should, shouldn't, and all of that on top of the appearance. Although that is happening, there is an at-rest peacefulness that exists here and now. So if the thoughts are rising and falling, and we're not associating with them, that dharmakaya that's always here, we begin to notice more and more. And that natural presence, that natural state, as we stay there, becomes something beyond emptiness, beyond the void. It becomes true reality. And again, in the teachings we're going to share together and explore, this reality is also explored. And it's so unique and beyond words, it's very difficult to actually describe it, because the experience of it is so much more powerful. What my aspiration is for this retreat is to actually have the direct experience of this natural state in a way that we can further establish it in our practice and in our lives, and move forward with that in the forefront, and still interact and still do whatever we need to do in this world, but with the view of something higher. And that's the theme of this retreat I really have been referring to as descending with the view from above. Because in the view of the actual reality, once we realize that, we live here with that higher view, with that view of what's called Dharmakaya, natural state, oneness consciousness, Sambhogakaya. There's so many words for it. It's unmistakable. And we've all had glimpses of it. So this retreat, I'm really, again, aspiring to dive in, establish it, live it, be it. Find out more deeply who we are. Do you want to? Sure.
Hi. Welcome. Welcome to retreat. Thank you, Ani. You know, the attention itself is so precious, and we don't give it much attention. It's the dynamic aspect and movement of awareness. Awareness is. We don't move it. We don't create it. We don't manufacture it. We aren't in control of it. It is. Awareness is. But attention is something we work with. You know, we can attend. And even if we've had, big insights, and beyond insights, actual direct experience of the natural state, our true nature, or even whatever we want to call it, a resting for a period of time as awareness. The attention is so easily grabbed back into the narration of even that experience, even the big experience, or whatever, even the restingness, even the natural state begins to be talked about, and the attention is on the talking about rather than the natural state. Because the attention is conditioned deeply, habitually, and conventionally to follow. The sensory, all the sensory awareness, which is a beautiful thing in life. I'm not, against any of our beautiful humanness, but it's habituated to follow what is moving rather than rest as what is immovable. So it's kind of a trick because, we are communicative beings. We have language, which is a beautiful aspect of our beingness, but it is a conventionally divisive tool. That's what it does. It divides into my pain, your pain, their pain, us, them, all of it. Dividing, 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 endlessly dividing. I think you said something about that, the endlessness of it. When that's in service to and through and from the natural state, then it's a creator of beauty, harmony, peace. But when it's in service to itself, the division, and it has all of the attention wrapped up and embedded in it, we find ourselves in the place of a continuous war zone, really. It's tyranny. It's tyranny. So the attention itself relaxes. I mean, it's less than relaxing, because relaxing is still too much of a doing, but that's close. The attention relaxes sort of, and for you it may not be back and down and in, but it relaxes out of that narrative, that talking about, that dividing, labeling, categorizing, naming, and rests in its natural state as the immovable, ineffable radiance that illuminates seeingness, the seer, and what's seen, all of it. That the attention isn't used to resting, except for, deep sleep. And, most people are like, God, I can't wait to go to sleep. And get a rest from attending to, your samsara, I guess is what you're calling it, the show, the display, the appearances, which in essence are not at all separate and are divinely perfect each and every holy instant, but are not the fundamental, essential ground. They're the reflection of that, the rising, abiding, and falling away. It's really a matter of identification, what we are identifying with and as. And as you were saying, what's forward? What's the context? And when we get quiet sometimes, often, in the space that's created with the loss of the talking about everything, the inner talking can really heat up, right? We've all had that experience where it's like, okay, the volume goes up to 10 of that inner narration. And yet, everyone here has a deep sense of the presence that is always. It's a matter of putting the attention there and kind of disidentifying in a way that isn't pushing or grabbing, but is more just a noticing of what is actual. What is actual? And what begins to bloom kind of more and more and more and more and more brightly, is the actuality of who we are. Who we are. Always have been. And the belief in this separateness, the belief is so habituated and conditioned, we think it's fundamental. We think separation is fundamental, and it's truly a convention. It's an agreed upon way of being, but it's not fundamental. It's not essential. It's not actual. The actuality of indivisibility. It's not what can never be divided. All of this begins to really bloom in a real, very tangible, actual way in one's experience, to where, you really can't see the division anymore. You can interact that way, like, okay, there's a teacup, this is a microphone, there's some, you can interact that way, but it's not like a fundamental belief. What takes the place of that is wonder and awe and disbelief and reverence. Because you honestly can't really believe that any of it exists and holds together in this beautiful, beautiful existence. So, even if we've hit the jackpot of enlightenment, or whatever we consider to be the thing, there's still the attention. Where is the attention? Where is the attention? How is one identified? It's almost like, I talked about this at the Full Circle retreat, and then I realized that a lot of people were too young to have ever tuned in a radio station with a dial. It's like, I'm old. I used to tune radio with a dial, you're driving through Nevada and you're like, trying to really get it, dialed in. This is a vast, unimaginably vast, infinitely dimensional universe. There's a lot of radio stations. There's an infinite, eternal amount, I guess you might say, of places to dial in the attention, and mostly we're just in the narrative, which is just mediating. It's just sitting on top of actuality. Dr. Hawkins used to say, as 1/10,000th of a second is all you've got between the actual experience, the direct experience, and the naming of it. And then there goes the attention, making all the references to the other times we've had the tea, and the other times, and and I was with so-and-so, and they were a real ass, and and here's the cup of tea that one is drinking right here. And it's vast and kind of mesmerizing. Yeah, labeling. It's kind of, meditation is wonderment. It's a dropping of all of the preconceived concepts in order to really touch and be touched by what's real. This this gift of existence and sensory awareness and all of it.
I want to say one thing about the labeling part.
Yeah, please.
Because I think it's such a crucial, vital point of the awakening. Like when we come in, when we're born, right? We're not speaking, we don't know language, so we're not labeling anything. We're not calling anything. Everything is just an appearance. And then we learn, we're conditioned to, this is a microphone, right? And these are roses, and we learn labels for everything. And some of I think what Jennifer's talking about and what we're going to be exploring with these teachings is the unraveling of that. What if we stop labeling? What if we look at this, or whatever, look at these roses, and we don't label it? It's just an appearance. And that's the beginning of the stopping. Because what that actually will do is, if you don't label something, you can't think about it. And if you're not thinking, then the obscuration of the mind is actually not there. So it's very simple. And yet, how many years? I know I've been on the path 30 years. And for the first 15, I missed that point, which is the fundamental point of all spiritual paths. It's the dissolution of ego, the dissolution of the self, of the referencing. Tibetan Buddhism gets into the science of this. And Tibetan Buddhism is also saying, Buddha Shakyamuni Muni and also Padmasambhava and all the great teachers and masters are also saying, don't take my word for it, look yourself. Look at your mind. Look for yourself, look and see. See if this is true. And once we understand that scientific, how the mind works, it becomes very easy to dismantle it, to be in control of it, to actually decide we're going to stop thinking. And a lot of the misconception around this is, well, if I stop thinking, then I'll just sit here and nothing will ever happen. I'll never do anything. I'll stop taking care of my kids. I'll stop going to my job. But actually, the opposite happens. Whatever is happening in the level of Dharmakaya, or true reality, it's not empty in the way we define emptiness. It's very full, it's very active. It has everything there to create the right view, the right world, the right conditions. So what we're doing with our thinking is also creating conditions, but it's karmic conditions. And karmic conditions are just a part of samsara. So in Tibetan Buddhism, what we're trying to do is get out of our karma, out of samsara, into the natural state where everything is already there. This reality is the true reality. It's what's going to happen when we drop our bodies if we don't take rebirth. And that's so much of what Bardo teachings are about. Don't take rebirth. Don't go back into samsara. Because we still have our mind when we drop our bodies. So there are ways and many teachings too about when we drop our bodies, there's an opportunity to stop thinking. But we could do that today. You could do that now. And then we see what happens. But we actually become more present. And as we were listening to that 4-minute signs of spiritual practice, there's ways to cultivate compassion, but by stopping thinking and all the things we do around thinking and all the stories and messes and everything, once we have the cessation of that, what comes in, what we experience, what we realize is this incredible bliss, this joy, and this unconditional love, and this incredible compassion and wisdom. And it's the wisdom of the Dharmakaya that then directs our lives.
Thoughts are still arising. I think the wording sometimes can be a little bit confusing, because if any of one of us is sitting there attempting very nobly and effortfully to stop thinking, that can, really be not very useful. It's a dead end, because what we resist persists. What we resist persists. The arising of all of that comes and goes, but in that coming and going, if one sort of just relaxes, and doesn't, and we are with that, but not. It's like you're kind of riding the current, but from a remaining, immovable presence. So it's coming, it's going, it's coming, it's going, and yet here I am. Here I am. But the attention, if it gets real sucked into the coming and going, and then the talking about the coming and going, and the referencing, thinking in a referencing sort of way, that immovability, the presence, that alwaysness isn't within view anymore. It's there. It never is separate or anywhere but where we are, just like love. But we're not oriented to it and from it. We are oriented to the coming and going, like an allegiance almost, a dedication to following and giving attention to what's coming and going in this real a way that is very identified.
Delusional.
So it's hardwired into the nervous system a little bit too. And so it involves a real physical component. Belief is hardwired in, because a thought comes, and then if there's a belief around the thought, in any kind of belief, an identified believingness around whatever arises, a whole cascade of hormones, and just like getting an IV drug, sets off a whole thing in our nervous system. And then emotions are created around the believing of the thought. And you have a feeling. And then you have another thought about the feeling. And then there's more belief generated. And it's juice. It's juice. And when one begins to really investigate that, like Ani was saying, look into it, just watch. When one begins to investigate that, and letting go of it as a need, well, and it starts falling out a little bit, and all the nervous system starts mellowing out, it actually can feel kind of unsafe, because people will say, well, am I depressed? What's happening? Because this big up and down thing that's caused by all of the physiological processes starts falling out of the experience as one wakes up to what one really is and begins to move as that. So the physiology goes through some really deep rearrangement, really deep rearrangement. And we can even have mistakenly have a belief around that is, that's life. That belief, that thought, belief, emotion, thought, belief, emotion, thought, belief, emotion. That's life. It feels like, life. And it's just a remembering, really. It's a return, a remembering. It dawns as we begin to investigate into that, really inquire and investigate into these beliefs. And if we are able to investigate and inquire from and as what everyone here has realized, the presence one is, awareness, presence, the ground, then those beliefs really unravel really quickly. And the physiology, the mind is the wind, the body is the sand, rearranges. It rearranges.
I'd like to take one thing you said and just look at it and kind of dissect it.
Okay.
Because Jenna was talking about self-referencing, which is egoic, and we all know, we've been on the path, all of us, that part of the path is the dissolution of ego. One of the things that happened for me when I started kind of getting in more of the looking, instead of just, there's times like the spiritual experience can just carry us away, and then we're in the bliss, and this is great, but we can't hold on to it. It comes and then it goes. And a lot of times retreat, because there's so much juice, we're carried away on retreat, and we're having this high at the end of the retreat, and then we go back to our lives, and we find that it fades. And one of the things that I've observed with myself in that whole process of coming and going, and I had it and I lost it, and all this mind stuff, is that I discovered that my ego, my personal self, my mind, only caused suffering. That's the only thing it did for me. There is a belief that, we have our egos and we have our personal views, and there's bliss in them, there's a pursuit of happiness with that. But when I really dissected it, I discovered, no, there's no bliss. There's no joy except a very kind of short-term joy. Ultimately, whatever my mind was doing and whatever emotion was coming up for me, a personal emotion, was going to turn into suffering. And I started monitoring that, and it was so obvious to see that the ego self is about separateness. It's about the self. It's about being critical. It's about all the things I judge myself for, and then I judge other people. And that's what it's doing. And even when I was craving something and going after whatever the craving was, and I got whatever that was, a new whatever, or a great whatever, there came in the mind the understanding that it's not going to last. Whatever this is going to go. It's impermanent, just like everything in samsara. So there was immediately suffering from knowing that whatever is happening right now, whatever joy I'm experiencing, is short-lived. It's going to eventually not be there. So the mind was always there to tell me like what my next suffering circumstance was going to look like. Mm-hmm. And it was just, once I had that deep kind of like, oh shit, all this is ultimately causing suffering for me. So there was that belief like, well, the ego's not all bad. There's positive ego too. But what I realized and what I came to see very clearly was that no, nothing that it's giving it pales in the face of the natural state, which is permanent joy, permanent peace. And again, you were talking about this, and I think from the study of Tibetan Buddhism, one of the things that was very hard for me to believe until I actually experienced it was the teaching that the cessation of the mind stops the suffering. Because the mind is always creating some type of energy that is unpleasant. And we look deeply enough, we can experience that. And when it stops, the relief of that alone is a level of peace and joy. But then where we go from there comes into more of the reality, and then it's actually, we have the view, we experience the actual reality. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of talk about view, what our view is. You know, the 6 different views of samsara, and then the view of the higher states, the states of Buddha land, states of the land of Dewa Jin. What is that, actually? It's another thing that is in these teachings that we're going to be doing this weekend, the explanation of what that actually is. It's already here, but we can experience it. We don't see it. We don't see the world as Padmasambhava, as Changu Rinpoche, who was a level of Buddhahood. And it's not hard to be in Buddhahood, and that was one of the things that Padmakara is saying. You know, this is Buddhahood. Stop the mind, and that's it. And I think what you were talking about in terms of stopping the mind, and even though it sounds so simple, why it's perpetuating itself constantly, we seem to have a difficult time, a challenging time, getting out of that cycle. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to explore that this weekend. Partly because so many people have talked about, I've had this experience, but it doesn't last. And I think these teachings are saying mastery of the mind is what's needed to establish this state, this self-realization, this Buddhahood, this oneness consciousness. Because mastery of the mind means we've cleared away the obscurations and we don't get hooked back in. The mind can't do its thing on us anymore to pull us back in. We've seen it for what it is, and we're not interested, actually. And disinterest is very powerful on the spiritual path, which I think was also what you were touching on, right?
Yeah, with the attention.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Disinterest. What we attend to, we nurture, we cultivate with our attention. We attend to something, well, then it grows. That's how it works. Yeah. So disinterest is, or non-attentiveness.
I think also, when you were talking about like we like these things or don't like these things, that's also such an important aspect of the journey, because it's the pursuit, it's the craving, it's the liking of samsara that keeps us stuck in it. Because there's a belief system that, there's something good about this, there's something great about this, and I want to see if I can be happy in this. And what the awakening is about is getting out of it entirely. Not just having a happy or better samsara, but leaving samsara and how we can all do that.
You know, I think, just in listening to what you're saying, if we're looking for the immovability, the truth, you know, the ground, in the impermanence, then that's a real dead end, because changingness is by nature changing. So if we grab on to what we think of as the awakened state, or an awakening experience, or this, that, or the other thing, and the expectation is, even though that is part of changingness, the changing the changing face of existence, and then we're startled because, oh, it's not here anymore. It is, but it is here as what is now appearing. And that can be a real trap, I think. You know, oh, I got it, I lost it. But, you know, I heard Adya say one time in response to somebody's question around that, really? Have you really? Look for what hasn't moved, is always here. Looking out of the eyes when we were 9, 19, 40, 50, same, always, already, immovable, unchangeable, and that is giving rise to next moment, best moment, for whatever is needing to arise into consciousness for, can we say, redemption, dissolution, return to love. It's not a static thing. I mean, even if we label it uncaused joy, uncaused love, at restness, peacefulness, the reflection of that is an ever changing, blooming, growing expression of, diversity and creation. But I think the mind thinks it's going to discover something that, is some sort of shiny jewel and then have it. And, put it in a box and store it away and have it just like that, always. And that's not what has happened here or been found here, experienced here. It's life as the changing appearance, the changing expression, the current of creation from and as absolute remainingness. It's gonna grow. It's gonna unfold, and it's going to respond more and more naturally to whatever is occurring from that place, rather than the how and the should and the all of that. It's a natural, responsive immediacy. That, it isn't just this, I got it, this is what it looks like, I have it now, and I'll be bummed out when it changes.
Which it definitely will.
I mean, it's natural. It makes us feel really safe. It makes the mind feel really safe to pretend that things are certain. That, there is an actual thing as certainty in the relative changingness. Yeah.
I think the ironic thing about that aspect of it is that the mind, this is a very strong, powerful teaching, that the mind is also called the wish-fulfilling jewel. Because the mind, once you've mastered it, before we've mastered it, it's definitely not that. We're a victim of it. It's riding us. Once we master the mind, it's the wish-fulfilling jewel. We can do anything well, I should be careful about saying that. We could do anything we want, but within the context of true reality, rather than samsaric reality. We create the heaven that we've been wanting. We don't land in it, it's not somewhere else. It's actually part of the view, and it becomes our reality.
We are that.
Exactly.
We are the heaven that the seeker is seeking. That's the joke. It's been here the whole time. It was never separate. It was never, somewhere else.
We were talking earlier today about like the simplicity of kind of finding that natural state, and it's like, oh my God, this is it, and it's so great, and like, how did I miss it? It's right here, right? But again, I've been on the path 30 years. In the first 15, it was right here, and I never saw it. I never experienced it. And I think, for you it was a little different. I think you had a kind of a.
But I like the pointer of simplicity. It's always too simple for the intellectual mind, the narrator, the describer, the storyteller. It's way too simple for that. And so that's where we run into that, wait, no, it can't be that. Too simple, too obvious, too unadorned and unglamorous. And so the mind just skips right over it, on to the story of, I got it, I lost it, or this or that, or, woohoo, or, it's just more entertaining for that aspect until it's not, that winds down and becomes very uninteresting compared to the reality, the essence, and one begins to move from and as essence. Yeah.
I also was surprised when, we've all had these experiences, these spiritual experiences. Michael Dowd came to one of our retreats, and he said that he had heard a teacher say that it all boiled down to like awakened people. The one distinction was that they felt okay. And I really like the simplicity of that also. And I felt that there was truth to it. I think it's a little more sophisticated than that. But that is a beautiful way to think of, what happens when we no longer have the mind that we're relying on, that we're hooked into, that's telling us how to view the world. We feel okay. We feel good. And I remember Eckhart Tolle, I was watching. He has so many YouTubes. I love watching him. He's so funny. And someone said, what's it like? What's enlightenment like? And he said, it's nice. And I think part of that is that, the mind is telling us there's got to be some big fireworks and all this stuff. It's building it up into something that, again, makes us miss just the natural beauty and the ordinariness of it. And the peace in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Come what may. That's the paradox and the thing that it has been very surprising here. Everything is, the fullness is real. So there can be days of grief or pain or just the full range of experience and the depth of the fullness here, but it isn't suffered It's not suffered. It's okay. It's okay. Even, and the mind, at least this mind, would have had a really hard time believing that. Like, those two things don't go together. Deep pain and grief and, open-heartedness, no matter what, and well-being. But that's how it's lived. It's just it's very different way of life, than well, if it's this, it's not going to be that. And if it's this, it's not going to be that. It's either this, that dividing again. It's wholeness, Solutions and problems are a one thing, one arising wholeness. Pain and joy, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think within that, the non-duality, once that non-duality is established, non-duality is, we talk about that and hear about that, and it's in every tradition that we want to move from duality to non-duality. And in the non-dual experience, my experience of it is, there are different things going on, but we're not particularly experiencing it as contrasted.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like the teaching that nirvana and samsara is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's a very powerful teaching, and it sounds like it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, how could that be possible? Because nirvana feels great, and suffering feels terrible, which is basically samsara, the world of suffering. So how could they be equal? But in the actual awakening, you discover they are. They're two aspects of the same thing, and we want to exit both. We want to exit the wanting of the nirvana and the pushing away of the samsara. And there, again, are ways to do that. I was so interested, I was so excited to actually have this retreat, because I've been thinking about what we've been talking about as a Sangha, this kind of, how do we establish it? We leave a retreat and it's just there. We're there, and it stays with us, and we stay with that. And the more that I'm kind of studying, well, I've also been coming to your retreats, which have been so helpful. But the more I find kind of the true understanding, the science of the mind, what it really is, gives us the tools to do what we want with our own minds. Dismantle it, use it the way we want, get it out of the way when we want to experience what true reality is, or experience what closer to reality, I guess, would be. An experience closer to reality than just this samsaric, in Tibetan Buddhism it's called hell. And we don't think of it like that, because there's moments of joy and there's moments of happiness. But once I think, and I think so many of us, if not all of us, have had this, once we have that experience of oneness consciousness, the natural state, all the names we have for it, it's a horror to think about going back into a samsaric state. And I think that also causes a lot of suffering for us. Just the thought of, this may leave, and then I'm going to be back here. And I'm not going to know how to bring myself back into this higher state. So this vacillating between states is something that I've really looked at for myself and for the retreat also.
You guys want to sit before we go to bed? It's 9.
It's 9?
Isn't it? It's 8? Oh, this clock says 8:58. I was like, really? Okay, we're cool.
Did you want to? Would you like to do your guided meditation? Or what are you feeling?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to want to do like a, really long guided meditation, but maybe just, I could just speak a little bit about what we've been talking about for 5-10 minutes while we're moving into silence.
Are there any questions? I know we've touched on a lot of things for just an intro evening.
Seems like we've been talking a long time.
Yeah, and when we do the oral instructions throughout the weekend, and also what Jennifer's been speaking about and teachings that she's going to be giving, we do want to go over some of this terminology and really explain it. So as we're going through the weekend, if there's questions that we have, like, I don't understand what this is or that is, to really feel free to either send a note to us to let us know, what do you mean by Sambhogakaya, or vehicle, or some of this terminology, because I think it's important. We could get stuck. We're listening to a transmission and we hear these words that we don't know. All of a sudden our mind's going to that. Well, I don't understand that word, so I'm not going to get this. And then we don't necessarily need those obstacles. I mean, at the same time, there's transmission. So we don't have to understand every single thing that's being said. A lot of seeds are being planted, and there's the transmission, and we will be continuing to kind of cultivate an understanding. So I think where I'm going with this is just to really invite participation and questions about the practices, about the teachings. Not so much kind of like, oh, this happened to me last week. Not so much personal for this retreat, more, this was said and I don't know what that means, or whatever is relevant in terms of really bringing this home for all of us and cutting through to bring these states here for us to live, to be. I didn't want to really do logistics, but I do want to mention just a couple of things. Scott is going to be our retreat master. So in terms of like anything logistical that comes up, or there's not enough heat in the hallway or whatever, or the food, or...
Go first. There'll be a basket. There's a basket back there. We don't have the sticky notes up there yet, but we'll get those. And
we'll get those tonight.
if you would just, because we can only find one basket, if you would just fold it in half and put an A or a J on it,
Mm-hmm.
we can do without having to open it up and read it. So.
Yeah. We do want to keep logistics to a minimum, which is why we didn't have an orientation. Everyone's so familiar with the flow here, we didn't feel that was necessary, and we really do want to just get right to, again, we have a short retreat, and there's so much that there's so much opportunity here. But if there is something that comes up logistically, housekeeping-wise, let Scott know, and if it's something for everybody, we'll certainly address it.
And if you could just sort of find me when I'm, just pull me aside or something, and you can whisper it to me, so we're not in the mess. That would be great.
Oh, that's another good point. This will be a silent retreat. So once we end with the meditation tonight, we will be in silence. And again, if there's anything that comes up, you could write a note or talk to Scott if it's really necessary. And then regarding the schedule, we had sent out a schedule and forgot to put breakfast on it. So there will be breakfast every day for everyone at 7:30. We're also going to do a 6:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. silent sitting in the shrine each day. And then I'm going to be doing some of the oral instructions we've talked about. They're so rich and there's so much going on with each of them. What we felt would be kind of a nice idea was that what we added in the schedule was from 2 o'clock to 2:45. Karma Shoying, Stephen, is going to be doing a repeat of the oral instruction. So we'll do an oral instruction in the morning, a more full one, and talk about it. And then from 2 to 2:45, Karma Shoying will do a repeat of the oral instruction. For anybody who feels like, I need to hear that again. And I can also give all of the materials, which I think we did in the announcement. A lot of it is from Juniper Ridge book, and we can talk about that more. But it's all accessible materials. So as we're listening, not to worry if we feel like, oh, I missed that, because we can go back and we're going to do a repeat of some of the oral transmissions. Any questions on anything?
Yes. No breakfast, absolutely no one noticed that notice. I would just like to know how many dairy-free and how many gluten-free people we have.
How many dairy-free people do we have? Okay. And how many gluten-free? 1, 2. Okay. And there's a couple of people that aren't here tonight that will be here tomorrow. So I think that's a good count. Yeah.
There's also heat in everyone's rooms. That's a little cool.
Yeah. So everyone's room has we each have our own personal heater, and people for all of us that are lodging here. So you could just turn the knob and give it a few hours for it to get the room really warm. If there's a problem with the heat in any of the rooms, again, write us a note, let Scott know, and we'll take care of it.
Long heaters on there. I live here.
You didn't know you have a personal heater in your room?
It's a lot of space heater.
Oh my God. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Look at the long ones they're on the you'll see them, they're just like little long metal tubes.
Yeah, baseboard heaters. Yeah. All right, well, now you know. Okay. We wanted to do a little bit of a silent sitting, not too long. And did
Yeah.
you want to do
Not too
a
long.
speaking part in that? Or how do you
Okay.
feel? Yeah?
I'll do a little bit.
Okay. Very good.
Do we want the lights this bright for silent sitting? No.